Las Oireachtas, the defective concrete block disaster has haunted the lives in Donegal, Mayo and beyond for too long. People who built and bought family homes to make a life in saw their dreams crumble around them. Instead of a shelter from the storms of life, their homes became prisons. With no help available, they turned to the state for support. When that support was found wanting, they took their message directly to government through all routes available. We have listened and we have heard it loud and clear. The scheme that today's legislation will underpin is a dramatic leap forward towards a 100% grant scheme. I believe that it goes a long way to address the fundamental concerns and indeed the needs of homeowners. I do recognise the homeowners' concerns and fears around the proposed enhanced scheme. They feel their trust has been let down before, and I want to assure them here today that we are committed to making this scheme work and will continually strive to ensure it is improved where that is needed. I said it back in August 2020 on my visit to Donegal in Buncrana that every scheme evolves, and I have no doubt that this one will continue to do so. The intense engagement with homeowner representatives over the past year has fundamentally reshaped this scheme for the better. It is a scheme of state support that is unprecedented anywhere in the world. It is the state stepping up, and rightly so, to help those who have found no other way forward. It is a light at the end of a long tunnel for families trapped in crumbling homes. Let's give this scheme a fair chance. Let's put in place a solid framework that we can build on and get people's lives back on track. I want to take this opportunity, Alas Ceann Comhairle, to pay tribute to the homeowners and their representatives who have engaged with the process through the working group, through Oireachtas hearings, submissions to the SCSI and the expert group, as well as frequent meetings of the Homeowners Forum. That work has shaped this scheme, and where agreement could not be reached, it always shone a bright light on issues. And I know that they will continue to press their case and work for a scheme that delivers. I also want to acknowledge, in particular, and thank John O'Connor, whom I appointed as the Homeowners Liaison, for his hard work and commitment to improving this scheme. The immense progress that we have made to date would not have been possible without his diligence. And I want to as well, Alas Ceann Comhairle, to thank in particular my officials, both at department level, who have worked so hard on this very complex and very difficult issue. In addition, I want to acknowledge my government colleagues, in particular Minister McConalogue, who is here beside me, Deputy Cleary and other government colleagues who are here today in the chamber, and indeed opposition representatives who have engaged with us through this process. They have been tireless advocates, both publicly and more often behind the scenes, to press the case for impacted homeowners, not just over the past year, but over several years. And I just noticed Deputy McHugh is here as well, who has been of great assistance to us in this process too. The administration of the current defective concrete blocks grant scheme has proven to be challenging for all involved: homeowners, engineers, local authorities and indeed the department. Difficulties with the consistent and appropriate application of IS 465 standard, the financial barrier to scheme entry, the negotiated nature of the methodology by which the grant amount is determined, and the significant number of judgment calls required of local authorities in what is a challenging local operating environment, and the adequacy of the grant amounts available were raised as really significant issues. It was very clear that there was a need to make changes to the administration of the scheme to ensure that it is as simple as possible for all stakeholders, while ensuring adequate cost control, good governance, but most importantly, good outcomes for homeowners. The draft bill today follows on from the general scheme and reflects the decisions made by government in November 2021, which was effectively to overhaul the previous grant scheme that was launched in January 2020. I would like to take this opportunity to draw attention to the key decisions and differences with the old scheme and highlight some of the major steps forward. In this scheme, there is the provision of a 100% grants subject to an overall maximum cap of €420,000 per dwelling. This eliminates the mandatory 10% homeowner contribution under the old scheme, and it increases the cap from €247,500 to €420,000. Grant rates, in keeping with the construction cost report, which was prepared by the Society of the Chartered Surveyors of Ireland, such that no homeowner will receive less funding than the construction costs recommended by the SCSI at their cost report. This links rates to an independent cost source to ensure it keeps up to date with real construction costs, unlike the old scheme. A government guarantee in regard to remediation works other than full demolition or rebuild, i.e. options 2 to 5, through eligibility for a second grant, if required, for a period of 40 years. So a 40-year guarantee, and again, neither of those measures existed in the old scheme. A revised application process, which removes the financial barrier to scheme entry, which will only require of the homeowner to submit an initial building condition assessment at minimal cost, which is recoupable on entry to the scheme, and this removes the €5,000 to €7,000 entry costs in the old scheme. The introduction of an independent appeals process for applicants, with all key decisions under the scheme appealable by homeowners. Again, this did not exist under the old scheme. Alternative accommodation and storage costs and immediate repair works to a maximum value of €25,000 within the overall grant cap. Again, this did not exist under the old scheme. The Housing Agency, importantly, playing a key role under this enhanced scheme by taking on the financial cost of testing and assessing homes and determining on behalf of the local authorities the appropriate remediation option and the grant rate of each dwelling. Again, this did not exist under the old scheme. A damage threshold to help ensure the worst affected homes are remediated first, and I want to assure homeowners this threshold will be set by regulations and it will be kept under continuous review. The extension of the enhanced scheme beyond the current scope of principal private residences only, to also cover rented dwellings registered with the RTB on or before the 1st of November 2021. The old scheme was principal private residences only. The inclusion of Clare and Limerick in the enhanced scheme upon commencement. Again, as we know, the old scheme was Donegal and Mayo only. Review as required of the overall grant cap and the grant rates, and adjustment if necessary by government order each year. The old scheme had no review mechanisms or criteria in place. A review of the operation of the Act 3 years after its commencement. Again, there was no review built in to the old scheme. Legislative provision for the exchequer funding of local authority and approved housing body owned social homes, which are affected. This was not covered under the old scheme. Exempt development status under planning legislation for remediation works carried out under the Defective Concrete Blocks grant scheme on a like-for-like basis. This was not covered under the old scheme. I want to take the opportunity, Alas Ceann Comhairle, to address both legitimate concerns and some of the criticisms around the bill in order to try to dispel any uncertainty. The government decision of the 30th of November 2021 called for a number of reviews to be completed to ensure that this disaster does not occur again and the core problems are addressed. The review of IS 465 2018 protocol, including consideration of the impact of other potential material such as pyrrhotite. Review of the adequacy or otherwise of the existing foundations in homes impacted by defective concrete block. Review of the potential impact, if any, of full cavity wall insulation on homes susceptible to damage or damaged by defective concrete block. And I want to clarify importantly here, Alas Ceann Comhairle, this bill allows for the Minister to adjust through regulations any issues that arise from these scientific investigations. And I want to assure the Dáil today, if a problem is found with the foundations or other issues through the NSAI, then it will be dealt with. Existing applicants under the current scheme will not be disadvantaged from early movers and will benefit retrospectively from the increased grant amounts and allowances which will be available under the enhanced scheme. Appropriate transitional provisions will be included in the new legislation to provide a mechanism to move applications to the revised scheme once it commences. I can confirm here today, Elas Ceann Comhairle, that the counties of Clare and Limerick have now been included in the enhanced scheme. And given the possibility that the spread of impacted homes could be wider than the 4 counties currently accepted into the enhanced scheme, the extension of the scheme to other local authority areas was considered as part of the wider deliberations on the scheme by Government. I, as Minister for Housing, Local Government and Heritage, may, with Government approval, extend the scheme to additional counties where the evidence supports such an extension. A pathway, importantly, for the admittance of other local authority areas onto the scheme is now in place, and it has worked for both Clare and Limerick, as evidenced by their inclusion in this bill today. And I can assure deputies that my department and I will deal promptly with any submissions received from other local authority areas who seek admittance to the scheme. The bill provides for me as Minister to introduce a scheme of grant assistance for local authorities and approved housing bodies to remediate social homes in their ownership which have been impacted by defective concrete blocks. The estimated cost overall of the enhancements to this scheme and the new scheme is £2.7 billion, which includes some 7,500 homes across the state. The additional costs reflect the construction costs as set out by the SCSI and inflation. And to reiterate again that each year I or any minister will be able to vary that rate on review each year without having to amend the legislation. The devastating impact of the crisis and the scale of the state intervention demands that we ensure that this never ever happens again. In October, I ordered an audit of all active quarries in Donegal by the National Building Control Office arising from concerns over compliance. On Tuesday, I received a copy of this report. I'm now reviewing it with a view to publication and ensuring its recommendations are carried out. And I will, Elas Ceann Comhairle, update the House on this matter as soon as I've concluded that review. In addition, the NSAI have been tasked with undertaking a review of the Irish standard for concrete blocks, including aggregates, to ensure it's fit for purpose. This work is now ongoing. I will appoint a senior counsel to review the causes of the mica pyrite disaster and make recommendations on this matter. I expect to finalise terms of reference and appoint an experienced SC in the coming months. And I will, again, obviously, keep the House informed of its progress. The clear goal of these measures is to draw a red line under this scandal and ensure no others are impacted into the future. I appreciate concerns around the need to pass this bill by the summer, and I want to thank the Joint Oireachtas Committee for granting a pre-legislative waiver. There has been extensive and indeed intensive engagement with homeowner representatives and other key stakeholders on the defective concrete blocks issue over the last 12 months, including the working group on the defective concrete blocks grant scheme, which was established last June and reported in September 2021, following which Government approved significant enhancements to this scheme. The expert group on the enhanced scheme, which was chaired by Mr Paul Ford, who I'd like to take this opportunity to thank for his work and lending his extensive expertise, knowledge and experience to this process, which reported on a significant number of technical issues which needed to be considered and advised upon. The Society of Chartered Surveyors of Ireland, which prepared a construction cost report for remediation works under the scheme, the findings of which have been accepted in full by Government and incorporated in the grant rates under the enhanced scheme, as I committed to do last year. Submissions from Engineers Ireland to my department on this issue. Submissions by homeowners to my department on the issue, as well as considerable ongoing engagement with them through Mr John O'Connor, former Chief Executive of the Housing Agency, whom I appointed as Homeowner Liaison Officer. Engagement by the National Standards Authority of Ireland with a number of reviews relevant to the defective concrete blocks issue, including and a special series of Joint Oireachtas committee hearings on the legislation. The remediation scheme needs a legislative basis, and more importantly, it needs to get going. We need to move forward with real progress and to implement this scheme. This bill is a real step forward. Every deputy is keenly aware of the scale of the crisis that confronts us. The scheme is the state stepping up to the mark, as we have a moral obligation to put in place practical solutions for impacted homeowners. We cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and we need to get a practical scheme moving. And I will say again, I'll ask Count Corla, that this scheme will evolve into the future, and we will continuously keep it under review. We will continue to work closely with all members of the Oireachtas, listen carefully to their views in this legislative process and indeed in the operation of the scheme. I think we can all agree that it's essential that the bill passes through all stages in the Dáil and in the Seanad in a timely fashion, and that the enhanced scheme can open for applications as soon as possible. Homeowners have been on a long, hard and often lonely journey since cracks first appeared in their homes. Today's bill may not be the end of that journey, but I absolutely believe it is the beginning of that end. The bill provides a clear pathway forward out of the nightmare that has haunted them for far too long. I commend this bill to the House.
Thank you, Minister.